afternoon, everyone. I was going to say we're in person today, so I get the opportunity to hear you respond to that. On behalf of the City of Rochester and Destination Medical Center, we would like to welcome you, big welcome, to the 18th episode of the Equity Series. We're really excited to have the opportunity to do this in person and to be able to have you all in the same space as we have conversations about how we move our community forward as we're discussing the work of equity and justice, how we thrive and ensure that that thriving belongs to everyone who lives in our community. And Wafa and I are super excited today because we do not get to moderate the session as we typically do. We're going to have guests to do that. But I would begin by introducing myself. My name is Chao, Mwatela, and I have the great pleasure of serving the City of Rochester as a Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Director.
And I'm Wafa, Elkhalifa, and I work for Destination Medical Center as the Equitable Development Coordinator.
Yes. So the Equity Series is a partnership between the City of Rochester and Destination Medical Center, but certainly welcome to any private or public organization that would be willing to be a part of it and that is deeply committed to the work of equity and justice. The Equity Alliance is a collaboration between the City of Rochester and Destination Medical Center.
Welcome, Rochester, to the Equity Alliance Equity Series.
Good afternoon, City of Rochester community members. The Equity Alliance aims to accelerate equitable change across our community by bringing together public and private organizations in Rochester to commit to the following equity anchors: continuous improvement, diversity, equity, and inclusion action planning, economic impact, transparency, and radical collaboration. The Equity Alliance commits to co-creating a healthier Rochester where everyone participates equitably in the design of public policy. Our purpose and goals are to deliver equitable outcomes, all people at a time. The Equity Alliance Equity Series is part of the Equity Alliance, a monthly seminar hosted by Destination Medical Center and the City of Rochester. This series aims to introduce diversity, equity, and inclusion best practices, build sustainable DEI community strategies, and foster advocacy and allyship within the Rochester community.
Power is like water, and policy change is the shifts the flow of that power. And so when we think of, we just need to change policy, that means we need to change how power is flowing. We need to ensure power is flowing to certain people, right? We need to ensure that power is shared, that it's not going in the same direction it's always gone. But we have to be aware of how power moves. We have to be aware of how policies change. And this knowledge building leads us to, okay, so how do we do that, right? If we view power as water and these policy changes are like dams that are being put up and shifting the way that water is flowing, then what are our tools to create that dam? How are we going to create that policy?
Social justice is this ambiguous space that the company hasn't quite leaned into before, but it was building up on things that we've done. And so it was really an agenda to drive equity across our entire business ecosystem. And when we talk about equity, we talk about dismantling systems and barriers that have existed for a long time that would cause specific individuals to not thrive. So while others are thriving, others aren't. So how do we remove those barriers and create a system that would allow, in particular, those that have been historically marginalized to now thrive along with everyone else?
Why are anchor institutions such an important part of a community wealth building effort? So anchor institutions are large public nonprofit institutions that have a mission to serve, right? They're producing a good or a service in a place that is intended for the people who live there or for the community that's being created. They are not going to get up and leave. They are inherently connected to that place. Their success goes arm in arm with the success of the communities around them. They are providing the goods and services that then they also are procuring and accessing from their communities as well. And so it's a symbiotic relationship. They are vested in their communities.
And at the very top of this ladder is full partnership. Young people are initiating, they are leading, and they are directing program activities. And importantly, they're sharing equal decision-making powers with adults. This complete engagement is all about the opportunity to lead, and especially an investment in building confident and competent leaders. If we are investing in our community, we need young people that have experience when they are young, when they are learning, when they have a little bit less on the line to build that confidence in leadership and invest in their futures.
Thank you to those that have joined us for the 17 virtual episodes and those that are here today. Please join us as we continue to build a foundation to support common DEI language, equitable policies, impact disparities, and develop a community-wide DEI action plan. Like to welcome our moderators for today, and I will begin with Pastor Andrew Crockett. I'll begin by saying he's a dear friend, but he has also served our community for many, many years as a social worker. He's also the founder of the Sports Mentorship Academy, as well as Barbershop Talk and Barbershop Social Services. So if you would like to join us, Andre, on stage, we would really appreciate it.
And I would like to welcome our second moderator for this panel, Sananda McCall. Sananda is a reporter and a weekend anchor with KIMT News 3. She's passionate about giving a voice for underrepresented communities and tackling important issues. And Sananda is doing a lot of work outside of just being a reporter at KIMT. She does co-host the Barbershop Talks, where it's a platform for open conversations that brings people together. Welcome, Sananda.
All right, thank you guys so much. I'm so excited. We're so excited to be having this important conversation with everyone, kind of just sparking this conversation in the community. And also just, we would love to hear from all of our esteemed panelists representing the many aspects of Rochester, from healthcare to education, local government, community organizations. So we do have Dr. Caroline Davidge-Pitts from Mayo Clinic. Yes. We do also have Wafa Elkhalifa with Destination Medical Center. Also, we have Chao Mwatela with the City of Rochester. Nikki Niles with Olmsted County. We also have Amanda Pelley with the Rochester Area Foundation. And Mr. Will Ruffin II with Rochester Public Schools. Thank you guys so much for joining us. So we do want to pose an opening question for all of you to answer, and that is, what is your elevator speech for your organization, and how does equity work engage with the history and present of Rochester? And we can start from to my right.
You're just gonna start with me first.
Yeah, sure.
Good afternoon, everyone. Will Ruffin II for Rochester Public Schools. I serve as the Executive Director of Equity and Engagement. And I think our elevator speech is really multi-layered. So if you think of Rochester, I always like to think of this place as a hub for so many different people. Rochester as a city has people from all over the world, literally all over the world. And when you think about all those different types of people, they all come to Rochester with different experiences and different thoughts about school. What does school look like? What does school feel like? And RPS is a place where all of those feelings converge together. Sometimes all of those feelings and thoughts may not go well to each other. So I think it's the job of RPS is to make sure that all the students who enter our schools and all the parents who enter our hallways feel welcome and feel comfortable and feel like our schools are a place where they can be included no matter where they come from and no matter what their previous experience with school has been, because this is the place for you. We like to call ourselves, or we see ourselves becoming the program of choice. So as people come here, even if they're not in Rochester, but they're in the surrounding towns, they're going to want to send their kids here because of that welcoming environment that we're trying to create. They will have no choice but to send their kids to Rochester Public Schools because we do want to be the program of choice.
Thank you. And I serve the City of Rochester, and I'm supposed to give an elevator speech for this, right? Yes. Okay. And I would say local government, this is my very first role in a space like this, and our only role is to provide service to the public. And I, as a person, did not realize as I lived in the city the number of services that local government provides, from snow removal, which we are really happy to have today, all the way to like our library services, our police department, our fire department, our streets, sewers, parks, all of those spaces. So as we're thinking about that service delivery, most of us walk through our day not really thinking about the amount of work that local government puts into creating an atmosphere in a community where we're able to navigate the spaces that we're going to get to school, to get to work. So my role is to really think about, assess, and evaluate, are we equitably delivering those services to the public? Does everyone have access? Does everyone have the opportunity to thrive? So I evaluate policies, processes, programming, and then think about how we innovate and change as our community continues to change. Think about communities that we typically haven't thought about or haven't been included in those processes, and how do we continue to engage them so that every community member is able to have that equitable service delivery. So that would be my quick elevator speech. Thank you.
Our local community foundation, and we have been in this community for 80 years. We're actually celebrating our 80th anniversary in 2024. And so a community foundation really serves the community in a number of various ways. But primarily, we are stewards of community assets. And then we then in turn use those assets to invest in community. So one of the things that we do is we provide grants. We have community grant making programs. We have a scholarship program for educational scholarships. We also host several fiscally sponsored organizations, many of which are emerging, newer nonprofits to our community. Many are BIPOC-led or primarily BIPOC-serving organizations. We have community space in which we allow again, emerging nonprofits to utilize that space at low or no cost. And then finally, we have significant investments around housing through our First Homes program, as well as a cross-sector partnership that the foundation is a part of, known as the Coalition for Rochester Area Housing.
Hello, everyone. It's really great to see many friends here in the audience, and I just want to also thank you all for having Mayo Clinic here today as well, because I love meeting you all. I am proudly South African, so I am one of the individuals that have come from far and wide, but really have found Rochester to be my home for more than a decade now. Up until more recently, I was principally involved in care of marginalized communities within Rochester, but have really been excited about joining the equity, inclusion, diversity aspect of Mayo Clinic for at least the last 18 months. And I would say that as Mayo Clinic being, a major employer of the city, it's not about Mayo Clinic and the community. We essentially are one. Our staff, our community members are staff. And so certainly as I've come into my role, I'm hoping that we continue to have a really strong infrastructure, both within Mayo Clinic and the community, so that we can continue to serve not only the community, but also have the community be a pipeline into Mayo Clinic, whether it be businesses, whether it be new staff. And I'm hoping that now I've met many of you that I can be some of that bridge, and really also thankful to Erin Sexton, who is our community director. So just really excited that Mayo Clinic is here, visible, and really want to be part of this.
Good afternoon, everyone. Nikki Niles. I'm the Director of Community Corrections for Dodge and Olmsted County. I guess a shameless plug in my elevator speech for Olmsted County is in 2024, we were voted by the Workforce Development as one of the top 5 places to work, in southeastern Minnesota, so yay, Olmsted County. But we really strive to create safe, healthy, and welcoming community through public service excellence. So whatever brings anyone through any service area of Olmsted County, attaining your driver's license, property taxes, for the population that I work with specifically, they don't necessarily elect to come through our doors, but to still be able to provide service excellence to the community that we serve, to ensure that we have then equitable access to those that walk through our doors. Thank you.
Hello again. I'm Wafa Elkhalifa, and I work for Destination Medical Center as the Equitable Development Coordinator. And for those who are not familiar of what is DMC, or Destination Medical Center, it's a 20-year economic development plan formed out of a public-private partnership between the state of Minnesota, City of Rochester, Mayo Clinic, and Olmsted County. So a lot of our partners are already here on this panel. And what this economic development plan aims to do is to create a vibrant community that would grow to create a global health destination here in Rochester. Since the inception of DMC back in 2013, and if you were to review our development plan document dated in 2014, it was very clear that there are some areas the board would like to see our work to be done through equity lens, and it appears in some programs that they were listed back in 2014. So you would see that we would like to, assist local businesses and support minority-owned, women-owned businesses. We would like to create a public infrastructure that would create an impact and a positive impact here in Rochester. Focuses also on creating opportunities for affordable housing, creating an ecosystem for businesses, and also increase the participation of underserved, underrepresented communities in decision-making. The DMC goals, and we've shared them in so many different avenues, but one of them is to create 30,000 jobs. And those 30,000 jobs, how can we do that in more equitable, more diverse, more inclusive? And so this is one of the areas of where my work focuses on, is to help the organization with diversity, equity, inclusion, support our public infrastructure, private infrastructure by advocating for affordable housing, and also increase and grow the program that we have for equitable engagement. And one of the tools that we have developed is community co-design. Thank you.
So this question is for Dr. Pitts. What area of opportunity do you see for Mayo Clinic as an equity practitioner?
So I'm sure many people here know about the Commitment Against Racism initiative, $100 million for 10 years. And our committee in Rochester, which I'm the chair of, have become the stewards of the money allocated for Rochester. And I would say since coming on to chairing the committee about 18 months ago, one thing that we've really been very intentional about is, number one, getting the right people at the table. And so our committee has a number of people from different areas of equity, inclusion, and diversity that sit at the table. We appreciate all their input. And we also have a separate committee that is tailored around the Commitment Against Racism funds. And I will say that since we've developed the infrastructure, not only have we funded well over 30 projects just this year alone, We've also provided significant contributions to the community, and also have continued with partnerships such as with the NAACP. And previously, there wasn't always, I think, clarity of where the money was being used, and it's kind of a little bit along the lines of, are we being transparent with the community, which is really important. And so we actually now publish within our site all the projects and the money awarded to those projects. We are also highlighting a number of our employee resource group projects and opportunities. And so just having that wonderful collaboration that we can continue to make this an important aspect of Mayo's work. I will also say we have significant executive leadership support in this area, and I think that makes a huge difference for how the tone is, especially now in the world of DEI.
All right. Thank you. And next question is for Chao. What equity milestones has the city achieved, and what opportunities lie ahead?
I will say, so when I joined the City of Rochester in 2020, there had been equity efforts, but none that was centralized to one position. So I was really glad that the city had made a commitment to have something like that. We would like to have centralized efforts for equity, but that they permeate the entire organization. So we prioritized, after evaluation, 3 main goals. The first one was recruitment and retention with a high focus on equity. The second one was DEI professional development that was organization-wide, and then the third one, community connection and engagement. And from those 3 goals, every department was able to come up with action ideas, and so we have a DEI action plan, action being the central word. Things that we're actively working on with metrics, KPIs, et cetera, so that we're able to see and measure progress over time. But some of the other things that have been really great is, and shout out to Amanda who's here today, is that organization-wide professional development that is cultural humility. It is a huge commitment, 6 months long, that all of our teammates participate in, and we hope to be able to make it through all of them. But equity audits that are JEDI audits, so that's justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, per department, to ensure that we're taking a deep dive into understanding what opportunities, what we're doing well, what we need to improve on, and then have action items based on that. And that has really moved policy forward. And then the other I'll mention is looking at the workforce within an organization and realizing it is not reflective of the community that we're serving. But knowing that we need to start really early, Ruffin, in recruiting people and exposing them to careers in local government in ways that they might not have access. So about 2 years ago, we were really excited to launch our very first internship program that welcomed students 16 years old and above to join us. And that has been wonderfully successful, to have young people who might never have thought about careers in local government spend a summer with us, work across departments. It is a paid internship, and many of those students have now said, I would consider a career in local government in a space that I had never thought about before. And there are many more, but I would like to leave room for everyone else.
Thank you. This question right here is for Nikki Niles. How does Olmsted County measure its DEI progress, and how is it shared with the community?
Yes, so let me back up a little bit. I just want to give honor to, I don't see him here, but Mr. John Edmonds, who was the first social worker hired in Olmsted County and was always intentional and still is intentional about his conversations and the importance and the intention around bringing matters to light, such as issues around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So thank you, Mr. Edmonds, for that. And so through his work and through the continued work of the county was the inception of our policy analysis and communications team. And that's a team of different statisticians that look at a lot of the initiatives that are done. And one thing that Olmsted County does is we randomly send out surveys to the community about what's going on in the community, what does the community need. For example, the community health survey that went out, and then the survey around designating race as a public health issue. And so a random set of that survey was sent out, and then the results were in and analyzed by our PAC communications department. And so what we're doing in the county is really using that data to, much like Chao referenced, to drive decision and policy making across the county in all areas, regardless of the area of service. So not necessarily just specific to justice-involved individuals or those that come through the doors of community corrections, but across the board. And one thing that survey, that CHIP survey, came back and said the highlights around some of the concerns in the community as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion are those things that kind of drive those disparities amongst those populations. So around public health access, substance use, the disparity around dollar, right? The equity gap as it relates to dollar. And so those are just a couple of the targeted, specific, innovative things that Olmsted County is doing to address DEI across the county as a whole.
Thank you for that. And as we do continue to talk about organizational commitments, this next question is for Amanda. What are some key economic commitments the foundation has made to address disparities in the community?
Yeah, so in our most recent strategic plan, one of the things that our board members and our staff felt very strongly about was making sure that we incorporated as part of that plan that all of our work would be done through the lens of equity, inclusion, diversity, and belonging. And so a piece of that and the way that we've operationalized that is we created an equity policy, and that really guides our day-to-day actions within all our areas of work, including our grant making. And so in 2024, we launched our reimagined grant program that was based on over a year of work in which our grant making community impact team reached out to members of the community and really talked about how to best address the different disparities that we see in the philanthropic sector. This is something that's discussed in Minnesota and in the nation, that there are, deeply ingrained disparities that are part of philanthropy. And so because of that, we have really tried to shift the way that we do our grant making. And one of the significant ways that we've done that is we have created a program that is no longer based on program-specific grants, but instead general operating dollars, which really is something we've heard from community as a great need to support the work that's happening. In addition, we have created new grant-making categories, including a category for historically marginalized communities. And a piece of that I think is really fantastic is that we have incorporated now, instead of just having our grant review committee, we actually have community grant reviewers. And so those are diverse individuals from all across different sectors in our community who bring their lived experience, who bring their knowledge and expertise into our grant making process and really allow us to have a more equitable approach to how we are grant making in this community. In addition, I would say that we have also looked at how to invest more specifically in grassroots organizations that are in our community and support their work, because we really do believe that there is great value in putting our dollars where the work is happening closest to community.
Thank you. This question is from Mr. Ruffin. How does the school district DEI work engage with diverse student population and address systematic inequalities?
That's a good question, Pastor Crockett. Thank you for that. I think we do so in a number of ways. And first couple of things that I could think about, we have external surveys. One of them is called the Minnesota Student Survey that all of our secondary students fill out, and it gives us insight to their perspective of how school is going from their opinion. Internally, we offer the Panorama Survey, which also gives us certain data, but it allows us to compare our students nationally. So how are our students in Rochester feeling like they belong in our system versus other schools across the country? How welcoming do they feel their school is? There's other things as far as, do they see themselves reflected in the curriculum? So we're trying to get better at looking at the research to guide some of our initiatives. But another thing I think that we're really starting to get good at is asking our students themselves. So not relying on a survey where we're not sure if they're answering correctly or not, but sitting down in a space like this and getting the information directly from the students. And from there, that helps us lead the direction of our work. If our students are saying that they don't feel connected in their classrooms, then we can take that information to our teachers directly and start building professional development around how to make our students feel more connected in their schools and in the different learning environments. And that's for all of our students. So it's for our diverse population, it's for our students who speak multiple languages, it's for our students who have disabilities or other abilities. So we're just really trying to get better at learning from the students themselves instead of being an adult and just guessing at what the problem may be, getting better at listening to the research, informing best practices, but more importantly, listening to the students who are in front of us.
For Wafa, So as Destination Medical Center continues to share its initiatives with the community, how is it addressing economic disparities through initiatives like supplier diversity or community grants?
Great. Well, one of the things that I like to brag about when it comes to working with Destination Medical Center is that we introduced the establishment of targeted business and workforce participation goals in our community prior to City of Rochester, right? I give Chao a hard time about this. So we adapted these goals back in 2014 and we have updated them. What these goals aim for is, as our funds, since we're responsible of stewarding $585 million from the state of Minnesota as part of this commitment, and we're utilizing these funds to make improvements in public infrastructure and supporting projects here within the DMC district. How are we creating economic opportunities for women-owned, minority-owned businesses? And this is where, from the beginning of DMC being established here in Rochester, we looked for innovative ways on how can we create consistent programming and targets and goals that we can, and metrics that we could measure. And so the measurements began in 2017, and not too long ago I did share a report with our DMC Corporation Board. It's a metrics report on how did we do since 2017 all the way to May of 2024. So the goal is for all the public infrastructure projects that you see within downtown here, Rochester, that they are receiving funding support from DMC. We require 7% of these projects that it would go to minority-owned and women-owned businesses. So 7%. We did achieve our goal. We exceeded our goal a little bit. What we ended up with is 7.6%. And what does that mean is more than $35 million went to women-owned, minority-owned businesses from 2017 all the way to May of 2024. And we continue to monitor these metrics and make sure that projects, whether they're public infrastructure or private investments that they're receiving funding from DMC, that they do create opportunities for women-owned, minority-owned businesses. Also, there is another aspect of that too, which is the workforce participation goals. We adapted these goals from the Department of Human Rights, which how many women should be working in a project, or how many minorities should be working in a project, as a way to encourage diversifying the workforce and creating opportunities for workforce to access prevailing wage, well-paid jobs that they can benefit them and change those disparities that we have existing in our community for so long. So that's just some examples of how we utilize the funds that we're stewarding, that we received from state of Minnesota for over the span of 20 years. But there are other programs also that we do, and we look for other ways in order to bring additional funds into the community. I'm looking at Julie Brock as DMC partnered with City of Rochester Workforce Development And we were able to win $1 million on the Bloomberg Philanthropies Mayor's Challenge, Equity in the Built Environment. That's not money from the city or taxpayers, it's money from outside of the community. And we're utilizing that money to build capacity in BIPOC women so they can access careers in the built environment. Another example also is the Main Street grant from Minnesota DEED. We were awarded for the first round $3 million. And the $3 million were used as grants to support businesses within the DMC district that they're looking to make some improvements, public infrastructure improvements in their businesses. And the $3 million were awarded to so many businesses, and 24% of the awardees were BIPOC. I think 30% of the awardees were women, if I remember the number correctly. But that tells you kind of an example of how we're trying to also bring additional investments outside of the Rochester and make sure that we're creating pathways for underserved, underrepresented communities to access these funds. Now, what DMC does, we do work in other sectors as well, and this is where the opportunity where we could consider that equity lens to be part of in all of our other work, whether in life science and bring in health technology companies and create different avenues for communities to participate equitably in thriving in the community.
Thank you. This question right here is for Chao. And why is community partnership critical in advancing DEI and the city initiatives?
And I would say because we exist solely to serve the public. I don't think it is possible for us as a local government to be successful in service delivery if we're not connected to the communities that we're serving. And so to your question, why is that community partnership important? It's because it's imperative. If we don't have it, there's no way that we can be successful in being able to deliver those services. So one of the things I often say, or questions I ask in different spaces, is do we know who lives in our community? So being really intentional in understanding that and always keeping track of who lives in our community, and then making sure that as we're making decisions, regardless of what those are, that folks in those different demographic groups are included in that decision making and pointing it out when that isn't happening. One of the things that we had done early on is a community survey where we were asking community members, how do you interact with the city? And for many people, they said, we only hear from the city when there's a survey about something. So we're being intentional about saying, rather than only reaching out and connecting to community when we want something, what are ways that we can connect to the community when we don't, so that we can just get to know them? Because it's in building those relationships that we're better able to understand what community needs so that we can be responsive to those needs. But also, if we're not connecting, people don't see themselves in our spaces. So those connections are important in order for them to see themselves, or even see that a space exists for them to be part of local government.
All right, thank you for that. All right, to Nikki, what strategies have you found effective for building successful community partnerships that advance DEI?
I think the most important strategy is just to have the conversation. You have to be able to have the conversation, and so often I think we shy away from having that conversation, and we couple that in, it's so hard, or it's so difficult, or it's such a challenge. But to those that identify as maybe a diverse person, like myself as a Black woman, I don't get the luxury of being able to shy away from something. I wake up as a Black woman every day. And so I make sure that we are intentional about the conversations that we're having. And it's not to necessarily persuade or change the person's mind, but it's just to engage in the conversation. I think communication is the biggest strategy, seeking to understand and just get back to just that human nature side of just understanding one another, and being intentional around that. A commitment that the county has made, a commitment that I've made in the work that I do, is to be intentional and to have those conversations, push those policies, don't shy away from those things, because there's people that walk through life and they don't get the luxury of not being able to do something because maybe of the color of their skin or their inability or the way that they identify. And so it is incumbent on us to make sure that we do the same thing.
Thank you. This question right here is for Amanda. How does the foundation structure partnership to ensure meaningful outcomes? Oh, excuse me. I got two questions, but let me just do one. Let me back up. Let's do this one. What role do grassroots organizations play in shaping and sustaining DEI efforts within larger institutions like the foundation?
Well, I would say grassroots organizations really play the biggest role. I mean, we know that grassroots organizations are the organizations in our community that are closest to community needs. Their leaders are well dialed in to where gaps exist, and they are best poised to really help bring those disparities forward to institutions in our community that can then do meaningful work around where to fill in those gaps. And so we would not be able to function as a community without our grassroots organizations, without the leaders of those grassroots organizations, which are most often very well respected by their peers within their community, again, very dialed in to the needs of community. We know that the grassroots organizations in our community, they all exist because there was an identified gap that was not being met. And so especially I would say for our culturally specific organizations, they really are best suited to understand the unique needs of a culture, of a people, of the disparities that exist within that community. And for us, you know, we know that as a steward of community assets that people have meaningfully and intentionally invested in our organization for the span of 80 years, we have to be very, very mindful of how we are then using those assets. And there's a phrase that is common in the philanthropic sector, and it's something called power shifting solidarity. And I would say that our foundation, along with many others across the state, have really moved into this mindset where we are looking to say, you know, these dollars were invested with us, but where they're really going to have the greatest amount of impact is if they're in the hands of those grassroots organizations that are doing the work. They're the boots on the ground, they're the ones having conversations with community members day after day and hearing about where the gaps are, where disparities are creating challenges that can then be looked at in these ways that we consider community engagement through opportunities like co-design, where we're actually hearing from community, we're hearing about gaps, and then we're able to implement that into, you know, future work. So I would say that grassroots organizations are absolutely our greatest partner in moving forward in equity in our community.
Now, Wafa, you did talk earlier about just how DMC, I'm sorry, goes, I forgot I was the one moderating.
It's a bit difficult to hear each other up here, just so you know. That's why I keep giving you this confusing look. Are you talking to me? Sorry.
Yes. So you talked earlier about how DMC gives back to minority communities when it's going about its projects. How can the minority community members share feedback on DMC's DEI efforts?
Okay. Well, I will begin with sharing with everyone that we do have board meetings and that they do include public comment section of those board meetings. We host them quarterly. They're the DMC Corporation meetings, and you will find them listed on our website. The Equity Alliance Equity Series has been also a space for creating conversations, and most of the attendees that they have been attending those sessions on monthly basis, there are a lot of the grassroots or the BIPOC led organizations, but we would like to also see the anchor organizations participate more in those equity series. So that has been a space also for connecting. Our team, which I see a lot of them here, they are always welcoming anyone to our office to have one-on-one conversations and deep conversations. And also to be transparent as part of our commitment in this Equity Alliance and in the Equity Series. Our organization has done a lot of internal work. Part of this internal work is we have had established a DEI partnership with Good Enough Consulting. Our consultant is here, Amanda. And she completed for us a JEDI assessment for the organization, which it did uncover some areas where we need to improve on our communication and in our outreach. And that in itself is not something strange to us, because it's been listed in a development plan from the beginning of DMC that we do need to partner with local organizations and have consistent messaging through our outreach and communication. And so we are opening the door to hear from you. How would you like to interact with DMC? One thing that I have been striving to do since I joined DMC almost 3 years ago is to make sure that our events are accessible, and I am doing targeted invitations to people, because I want the events to be representative of the population that we serve. And so I would love to see more of you attend the DMCC board meetings. I would love to see more of you contact us, connect with us, whether through the Equity Series or if you see any of our team members. Another strategy that we have done, and Jamie Rothi here is leading that strategy with the City of Rochester, which is the Business Forward strategy, which creates the opportunity to engage with businesses as we have public infrastructure improvements and disruption due to construction. So that's another way where they have been engaging with business owners, local businesses, task force, the downtown task force, focus groups, and also, not to forget our consultant, Jess Roberts here, by design. We have established one of the most unique equitable engagement tools that created an opportunity for organizations across our community to hear different voices from the community and to include them in making a decision, for the community.
Thank you. Dr. Pitts, you mentioned earlier that you have leadership support. So this question is, how does Mayo Clinic address resistance or pushback against DEI initiatives?
I just came off I'm part of a fellowship that I'm doing this year with healthcare leaders, and I just came from a conference where there are about 24 of us, where for 3 days it was so unfortunate to hear about all the takedowns of a lot of the DEI efforts at some of their institutions in certain states. And one thing I think that came out of that conversation for me was I just really feel lucky that we live in Minnesota and that we work for Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. I would say that some of the resistance that I've seen around DEI initiatives sometimes will come from more at a personal level. Where there might be a supervisor or a manager or a colleague that might have some concerns around certain DEI initiatives. Certainly, I've had a lot of experience in transgender healthcare around resistance around certain treatments in that space. And so I would just say it really goes back to what you were talking about with respect to education, and also providing resources. So, sometimes when we hear on an individual level about, people having some concerns around DEI, we need to be able to give their supervisors and managers resources to be able to manage that. We're not able to be in every space all at once in such a large institution. And so just really trying to empower people, particularly those in leadership positions, around some of the educational importance and how DEI initiatives are good for business, good for the community, good for staff. And so I hope that Mayo will continue to be that beacon of light, that DEI is important. And, you know, I would say to all of us, even if the word DEI had to go away for some reason, I would hope that the work would still continue even if it didn't have a title, because I think we all know that it's important. So,
can we clap for that? Yeah. All right. Also, how are we looking on time? Okay, awesome. All right, this next question is for Will. What challenges do DEI practitioners face in educational settings, and how can schools support them?
I think Doctor mentioned some of those, right, about resistance, and resistance is one of the biggest barriers that we faced, at least in the educational space. And I think because I was just having this conversation with a colleague yesterday, we're fighting a battle on two fronts, one of being internal and one of being external. So we have many people within our organization who grow up however they grew up, and they bring that mentality into the workspace, again, where we all converge together. And sometimes some people don't know what they don't know, and we can't blame them for that. But once they are made aware, if we continue not to change, then that's on them. And some people don't know what they don't know, and they try to seek that out. They try to change, and they try to be better, and we want to applaud those people as well. That is one of the biggest barriers that we're facing, because all of us serve students. We have different opinions on how we serve students, and sometimes we don't always agree. And when someone offers a suggestion on how we can connect with our students differently or better, those suggestions aren't always taken in. So we're doing a lot of work with trying to offer professional development for our staff inside of the school district, while also doing the work outside of the school district as well, because sometimes our community members have different perspectives also. So that's a huge barrier, the resistance to change from inside the organization while we're fighting that, and while we're fighting the resistance outside of the organization. But one thing I think that we can get better at in Rochester Public Schools and in all of our different sectors here in our community abroad is to make sure that we continue to have the conversation, because our students have families that work in all of the different sectors. So if we are continuing to have the conversations and honoring our commitment to be better, that's going to help all of the different sectors that we're representing on the stage, and it's only going to make our community get better. But if we're not having the conversation in the school district, we're not having it at the city, we're not having it at the state level, then we're only doing an injustice to the people who live here. And we just can't afford to do that. Someone mentioned earlier about if the DEI word goes away, we have to continue doing the work, and I'm glad you said that, because that's the absolute truth. And we also know that there were a lot of people doing the work before those buzzwords were a thing, right? My position was created because of all the inequities that were happening within the school district, and our parents who were advocating for their child and advocating for their experience, and even employees within the school district who were voicing their different experiences in the school district. So this was created. It took something super unfortunate like the murder of George Floyd in front of the whole world, basically, before people were open to having that conversation. Some of us were already trying to have the conversation. So because this man was murdered in front of everyone, we have something beautiful that came out of it, was a lot of DEI positions and programs across the country that were created. So it wasn't even about the man himself, but what came out of that. And what needs to continue to happen is all of us continue to have these conversations, continue our commitment to get better with each other as people within an organization. And then I think we also have to get better at connecting our sectors together and working with each other and pooling our resources together so that we can make all of our sectors just better.
Thank you for that.
You know, Will, I appreciate the comment that you've mentioned in Dr. Caroline too. It's taken me a little bit. That's why I'm like, I need to make a quick comment. Chao and I just had this conversation yesterday about we're in a time where there is transitions, and the change in the political landscape could affect some programs that we have and that we work with, or the existence of some programs in it. And I just want to share a reminder to the community, and to all of us as leaders in different organizations. We do see some organizations already that they are removing diversity, equity, inclusion, national organizations, they're removing that. And it just gets me thinking, it is an optional program for organizations to remove diversity, equity, and inclusion. But it's not optional for the communities that have dealt with the disparities for so long before we all existed here. It's not optional to deal with these disparities and difficulties as you navigate a world that's not created by you or by your community, and you did not make these choices. And so, to me, it gets me thinking, who are we as a community? Who are we as Rochester? How do we define equity? How do we define diversity? What do we stand for? Because as we're thinking about changes, or some organizations may make that optional decision because it's an option. It's not, it's an extra something on their menu, right? It's not something embedded in everything. It is time for us to actually make DEI embedded in everything we do, and it's tied to policies, tied to procedures. So it's not optional. So it doesn't come off the menu.
Wow. Absolutely. I believe it's time for our closing question that I want to pose to all of you. As we do look into the future, and thank you so much, all of you have been extremely passionate, and I love the updates. We don't get to hear this in the community like that, so thank you for being transparent. But as we do look into the future, what is your organization's diversity, equity, and inclusion commitment to the community? And we can start with Will.
I'm sitting here trying to think, and you just said my name. Like, okay. I think our commitment, as far as Rochester Public Schools, started a few years ago. And I want to preface that by saying this. I've been connected to our school district for approximately 16, 17 years or so in various roles. And a couple of years ago was the first time that I felt the school district was in alignment with each other. We were in line with our goals and where we wanted to go as a school district versus being in different silos working towards something. All the arrows were pointing towards the same target. And as far as the connection to the community, I think that started with our strategic plan effort, where we had over 60 focus groups where people were coming in and they were meeting with various leaders throughout the district and telling us what they needed, what they wanted to see in a school district, what they wanted for their children. And we took all of that advice and then created our strategic plan. So our strategic plan is a direct result of listening to our community. And I think that's our commitment, to honor the strategic plan, because if we do so, we're honoring the voices of the people in the community who said they wanted certain things. In our department specifically, I'm looking at some of the people here, family engagement is something that's always been talked about and I think kind of dabbled in our school district, but now we're being intentional. We're trying to offer, I would say, learning experiences for our families so they can learn how to advocate for themselves and learn how to advocate for their students. So if you hear of a program called CAPE, which we call our Caregiver and Parent Empowerment Program, that's what this is. So when you see that information coming home, this is where we have that. You said we don't always have the chance to get these updates. This is where you can come and have these updates alongside of other families and have these type of discussions together. We also have Ms. Sarah Louise, who is here, who we've restructured her role from just being a coordinator of equity to coordinator of youth empowerment, understanding that we cannot improve ourselves without uplifting our youth. And again, being intentional and putting some money and finances behind that and having someone who's willing to lead that work, I think shows our commitment to the youth. One thing that the community also said was our students feel like they don't have a plan for life after high school. And we did take that seriously. We spent all of last year researching what are the best practices in this space. And we finally landed on a software platform called Zello. And Zello is a space where the students take these different career inventories and they get to see what their sparks may be, some of those things that they may be interested in. And the beautiful thing about the software, it then maps out colleges that are attached to the students' careers that they have chosen for themselves. And it starts to map out scholarships that ties into those colleges, that ties back into their career inventory. So that's one piece. And then the connection to the community, the software also allows all of you who have different companies and organizations to post an internship opportunity, a mentorship opportunity, or here's where a job is available so that our students can apply and get connected to the community all through the software. It took us a long time to learn and figure this out, but again, being intentional and putting some finances, resources behind that so that our students can finally start to map out a plan for life after high school, because that's also one of our goals, is all of our students should know what they're going to do when they leave. It may not be college, it might be going into the workforce, it might be going into the service, whatever that is, but they're going to have a map, a plan of how to get to those goals. So those are just some of the things that I'm thinking about off the top of my head as far as listening to the community, staying true to our strategic plan because that's what we said we were going to do, and then putting some resources behind those things so that we can do so.
Does anyone else have their thoughts together? Okay. I would say our commitment, at least my commitment, is twofold. I would say a lot of times when we're talking about equity or social equity, so the City of Rochester, similar to the school district, in our strategic planning, we do have social equity as a foundational principle. And it is an ambiguous thing to describe sometimes, so I think it's really important for us to understand what that means. So I actually wrote it down, but not for this question. So I'll read it out. It says, social equity is the fair and just management of all institutions serving the public, directly or by contract, fair, just, and equitable distribution of public services, and implementation of public policy, and it goes on and on. So my commitment would be, one, when we're talking about equity and social equity particularly, we are often asking the community to do something. We're asking them to change and evolve how they live, work. Essentially, we're asking them to assimilate without ever doing any internal examination of ourselves. So my commitment would be, how do we examine our internal structure, policies, systems, and make changes there before we go to the community and ask them to change and assimilate. You said, Dr. Pitts, yourself, that you're from everywhere, similar to me, and many students who are coming to the city. We can't ask them to all assimilate and adapt to what we're doing. We have to do some internal reflection and change our internal systems first. But then the second part of the commitment is the idea that our community members do not experience us as in a vacuum. Many of them cannot say, is this a county thing? Is it a city thing? Is it a nonprofit thing? And so the second part of my commitment is, how do we get together and come up with an action plan, right, that we're all working on together, so that they're not going over to the school district or the city or the county and having an entirely different experience depending on where they are. How can they go into any and all of the spaces and have an equitable experience? So part of our trick, I guess, is how do we get together and start having conversations like this, but move them forward from conversations to actual action and policy. Thank you.
So I would also say my answer is a two-part. So our mission at Rochester Area Foundation has and will continue to be building better communities for all. And really stressing that for all piece, because as I said earlier, in our strategic plan, we want to be intentional about embedding DEI and belonging into everything that we're doing, all our programming, all the ways that we are involved in community, whether it be through our housing initiatives, through our grant making, our scholarship, our hosting of fiscally sponsored organizations that are serving cultural communities in our across 14 different communities in the Rochester area. And then as far as a commitment that I've been thinking about for a long time, I'm going to take us back to 2021 when our DEI committee was newly formed and we were trying to figure out what comes next. We actually had started a series of practitioner convenings, and so that was a cross-sector collaboration between DEI practitioners in local government, in nonprofits, local businesses, our educational institutions. And so for the course of a year and a half, we had facilitated meetings where we brought together those voices and we talked about the needs, we talked about the vision for the future in terms of our community and what we wanted to see. And one of the things that did come out of those sessions was this concept of a DEI plan for the community. And so many of the folks up here and many of you in the audience have continued to talk about what that could look like. And so I think we're poised at this time in history to really consider what that could look like for our community. And so I'm excited to continue to have conversations around that.
So certainly I commit to getting to know all of you better. And I'm so glad you are in RPS, because my kids go to RPS, and having someone like you all in there just makes me very, very pleased today. So thank you. And so, yeah, really, my commitment is to get to know all of you, and I definitely would say that I want to continue to be intentional, even though I work really in the clinical side at Mayo Clinic. I want to be intentional to continue to work with our community engagement group so that everything we do does have that community lens to it. And what I think has been so great about seeing our commitment against racism proposals is that the majority of them do have a community aspect to them, even if they're centered within Mayo Clinic. So, certainly our employees who are wanting to do this work are thinking outside of Mayo and thinking about the community. So that's really, really great to see. And I think that my commitment to this role as well in the future is going to just to continue to focus on belonging, which is an impossible thing to measure, but just knowing that we can all feel belonging in our job, belonging living in this community, no matter where we come from. I think that's just something really important to look at going forward.
Much like my peers, my response is kind of twofold. As far as a county-wide commitment, like what's been shared historically, in 2017, Olmsted County, with a board resolution, passed the One Olmsted initiative, and out of that came a lot of different attainable measures, one of which is being stood up right now, and it's called Mobilizing Olmsted Voices for Equity. So that is a council of community members from all sorts of lived experiences to kind of be in partnership and bridge gaps between local government and then the community. So that's one of the action steps that came out of Olmsted County, and then the inception now of the MOVE Council. And then I think, second, my personal commitment is respective to the justice-involved space. When we look at kind of the data and who is on supervision in Olmsted County and in the state of Minnesota, right now in Olmsted County, as far as population is concerned, the Black population accounts for about 8% of the population, but 38% of those that are on some form of community supervision. And so it is my calling, my life's mission to address those disparate gaps and close those gaps specific to those that we serve in our community. And I think every entity within Olmsted County is doing that, as we all know that those disparate numbers are not just for justice-involved individuals, but for individuals of all walks of life as well. And so some things that we've done specifically in corrections is we have a group of Black men that are on supervision. They're called the IDEA team, which stands for Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, Action. We cannot cookie cutter how we supervise individuals in our community. We have to take into account lived experience, historical traumas, and all of the things that make us behave in a manner of which we do. And so just continuing to build on that, but not just focusing on Black men, but we started with Black men because when we look at the gaps in society, Black men is still at the starting line, and everybody else has kind of taken off. And so that's where we started, but that's not where it ends. And so that's my commitment to those that are justice involved, and then overall in the county as well.
As for Destination Medical Center, I have to say that when it comes to looking forward and looking into our commitments, we cannot not think about our internal capacity building in the DI space and the external commitments. So we're committing as an organization to continue professional development. We recently formed an Equitable Economic Development Steering Committee that is formed out of multiple of my colleagues here, where we get to take some of the work that was done already by our consultant, the JEDI assessment report that has a lot of recommendations to improve some of our work internally, whether it's HR, communications, and processes, and to establish that consistency that we need as an organization. When it comes to externally, there's some of the work that is visible in the community that people have seen it already, whether it's equitable engagement or establishing those targeted business goals, as I've mentioned earlier, because it was from the direction of our board. It's in our strategic development plan from the beginning. But we're approaching our 10 years anniversary since DMC began its work in 2015. And I would love to cultivate the connections that I already have with many of you, with many of the organizations that I worked and partnered with, in order to get your input and to see how do you see DMC should do its work for the next 10 years. What do we need to do in order to make more equitable, more vibrant impact? It is really important for organizations not to just commit externally, but to do the work also internally. And it is a lot. Other than the assessment, we have done, the professional development, and I hope that we continue to do different forms of professional development. We're doing that for the community through the Equity Alliance with the Equity Series, as we have discussed amazing tools, amazing topics for the past 17 episodes, and we hope we continue to do that on the second Wednesday of every month from noon to 1 virtually. But yeah, it's a lot to think about, and what I tell Patrick and tell Catherine and Allison and all our teammates at the steering committee is that we need to make our work visible, and we need to show the community how do we look at equity, or how do we define equity, what are our DEI priorities, because we do have established DMC goals and they're very clear and the community knows what they are, but what does it mean when we say we're doing or we're achieving these goals with an equity lens? And that's some of the work that we're doing internally in order to make our work more transparent and establish that sort of accountability with the community. I want the community to come and ask me, what have you done so far? So I can share with them and make it visible enough. Thank you.
Thanks, Wafa, for that. And we want to like to thank the panel, each one of y'all, for your commitment and the wisdom and the update that y'all had shared with us. And also, with the remaining time that we will call this networking time, that you'll get an opportunity to talk to the panel also, but also get a big chance to explore the Rochester Black exhibit that me and Nicole had developed. And those panelists and the organizations up here, they played a pivotal role in us being able to develop this. Each one of them, from the public schools to the city, the county, DMC. We reached thousands of individuals. We was at the airport, Boys and Girls Club, most of the school districts, Discovery Square. We started this project in February 2024. We only had one down month out of the whole thing. So it shows that it's something that the community really wants, showing how powerful it is, not only for the kids, but to see some of the faces that the elders being celebrated on a time when it wasn't celebrated. And each one of us stand on their shoulders, and we here because of those individuals that you see that's on that panel. And half the story has not been told. And as Nikki talked about John Edmonds, and that's why history is so important, and we got documents now that we're going to uncover that. He wasn't the first social worker. You see that about, and so oftentimes when we say that people the first, it's not, because it's hidden history that needs to be told. And so we want to continue to live out their legacy and continue to document their legacy. So I'm looking for your support again, okay? So at this time, we'll let y'all do a breakout session and get a chance to explore the panels and also get a chance to talk to those who was on the panel today. And thank you for my sidekick right here. And Chao and Wafa, thank you for letting us moderate. And thank you all for coming.